Las Vegas, March 1971. Caesar's Palace was the newest jewel on the Strip. Marble columns, Roman statues, gold everywhere, the kind of opulence that made other casinos look cheap. Dean Martin had been performing there for 6 months. Sold-out shows, 5 nights a week. The marquee outside read, Dean Martin, the King of Cool. But inside the executive offices, Robert Castellano had a different opinion. Bobby, as everyone called him, had purchased Caesar's Palace in 1970. He was 42 years old, made his fortune in real estate in New York, and decided Las Vegas was his next conquest. He knew nothing about entertainment, nothing about performers, nothing about the delicate ecosystem that made Vegas work. What Bobby knew was numbers, revenue, profit margins, and in his mind, Dean Martin was expensive, unreliable, and worst of all, a drunk. Dean had built his career on a persona, the charming drunk, the guy with a rocks glass always in hand, slightly unsteady on his feet, singing love songs with slurred perfection. Audiences loved it. They came to see Dean stumble through a song, make a joke about his hangover, and somehow still hit every note. What audiences didn't know was that Dean rarely drank while performing. The glass was usually apple juice. The stumble was choreography. The slurred speech was character work. Dean Martin was one of the most disciplined performers in Vegas, but he'd spent 20 years convincing everyone otherwise. Bobby Castellano believed the act. It was March 18th, 1971. Dean had just finished his afternoon sound check. He was in his dressing room when his manager, Herman Citron, came in looking nervous. "Dean, Bobby wants to see you in his office." Dean didn't look up from the magazine he was reading. "Tell Bobby I'm busy. He said it's important about your contract." Dean closed the magazine. "What about my contract?" Herman hesitated. He didn't say, but he had that tone. Dean knew the tone of a man who thought he had power over you, the tone of someone who'd forgotten that in Vegas the talent had more power than the money. Dean stood up. "Let's go see what Bobby wants." Bobby's office was on the top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip, a desk the size of a small car. Everything designed to make visitors feel small. Bobby was sitting behind the desk, smoking a cigar. Standing around the room were about a dozen people, pit bosses, floor managers, security chiefs, all Bobby's people. Dean noticed immediately this wasn't a private meeting. Bobby wanted an audience. "Dean, come in, come in." Bobby's voice was too loud, too friendly, the fake warmth of someone about to deliver bad news. Dean walked in, didn't sit, just stood in the middle of the room, hands in his pockets. "You wanted to see me?" Bobby leaned back in his chair. "Dean, I want to talk about your shows." "What about them?" "They're great, really great. Audiences love you." Bobby paused for effect, "But I'm concerned." "About what?" Bobby took a puff of his cigar. "About your reliability." Dean's face remained neutral. "I've never missed a show." "That's true, but I worry about how long that'll last. Given your situation." Dean knew where this was going. He could feel it, but he let Bobby say it. Let Bobby expose himself. "What situation is that, Bobby?" Bobby smiled, not a friendly smile, the smile of someone who thought they were being clever. "Come on, Dean. Everyone knows you like to drink. It's part of your charm. But there's drinking for the show, and then there's drinking that affects the show. And I'm hearing things." "What kind of things?" "That you're drunk before you even get on stage, that you can barely stand up by the second set, that we're one bad night away from you collapsing on stage in front of 1,200 people." The room went very quiet. Bobby's staff were all watching Dean, waiting to see how he'd react. Dean didn't react. He just stood there, completely still, looking at Bobby. "Who told you that?" Dean asked quietly. "Multiple sources. People who work here. People who've seen you." Dean nodded slowly. "Bobby, have you ever watched one of my shows?" Bobby seemed surprised by the question. "Of course, I own the casino." "No, I mean really watched. Not from your office, not on a monitor. Have you ever sat in that showroom and watched me perform for 2 hours?" Bobby shifted in his chair. "I've seen enough to know." "You haven't," Dean interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath. "Because if you had, You'd know I'm not drunk on that stage. I've never been drunk on that stage. Not here. Not anywhere. Dean, I've seen you stumbling. That's called acting, Bobby. It's what I do. I play a character, a lovable drunk who sings pretty songs, and people pay money to see that character. But that character isn't me. Bobby's smile was gone now. Are you telling me the drunk thing is all an act? Every bit of it? I don't believe you. Alphace's Dean shrugged. That's your problem, not mine. Bobby stood up. He was trying to take back control of the conversation, trying to make himself bigger than Dean by standing. Let me make something very clear, Dean. I own this casino. I employ you. And if I think you have a drinking problem that's affecting my business, I have every right to be concerned. Dean looked at Bobby, really looked at him. And Bobby must have seen something in Dean's eyes because his confident smile faltered. Bobby, you don't employ me. You have a contract with me. There's a difference. It's the same thing. No, it's not. Employment means I work for you. A contract means we have an agreement, and our agreement says I perform 5 shows a week in exchange for money. It doesn't say anything about my personal life. It doesn't say anything about my drinking. It doesn't give you the right to make accusations based on gossip you heard from people who don't know what they're talking about. One of the floor managers in the room shifted uncomfortably. Bobby glanced at him, then back at Dean. I'm trying to protect my investment. You're trying to prove you're in charge. Dean interrupted. You bought this casino 6 months ago. You walked in here thinking you owned everything. The building, the tables, the people, and you thought you owned me too, but you don't, and you never will. Bobby's face was red now. You don't talk to me like that, not in my casino. It's not your casino, Bobby. It's Caesar's Palace. And Caesar's Palace existed before you, and it'll exist after you. But if you keep insulting the talent, it won't be standing much longer. Bobby leaned forward, both hands on his desk. Are you threatening me? Dean smiled, not a friendly smile. A cold, calculated smile. No, Bobby, I'm educating you. See, you think Vegas works because of money, because of buildings and lights and marble columns, but that's not what Vegas is. Vegas is the performers, the singers, the comedians, the dancers. We're what people come to see. Without us, you're just a guy with an empty building in the desert. Dean took a step toward Bobby's desk. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to prove I'm drunk. Tonight, you're going to sit in that showroom for my entire show, all 2 hours, and you're going to watch me sing and dance and tell jokes and interact with the audience. And if, after all that, you can prove I'm drunk, I'll walk away from my contract. No lawsuit, no complaints, I'll just leave. Bobby straightened up. And if I can't prove it, then you apologize. In front of your entire staff. All these people standing here who just heard you accuse me of being an unreliable drunk. You apologize to me and to them for making baseless accusations about someone you clearly don't understand. The room was dead silent. Bobby's staff were all staring at the floor, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. Bobby looked around the room, looked at his people, looked at Dean standing in the middle of his office, completely calm, completely in control. Fine, Bobby said. Tonight, I'll be in the front row. Dean nodded. Good, bring a notepad. Take notes. Write down every moment you think I'm drunk. We'll review it after the show. Then Dean turned and walked out. Didn't wait to be dismissed. Just left Bobby standing there in his own office, surrounded by his own people, looking like a man who'd just made a terrible mistake. Herman followed Dean out. Once they were in the hallway, Herman whispered, Dean, what if he actually thinks you're drunk? What if he doesn't believe? He will, Dean said simply, because I'm not drunk. I've never been drunk on stage, and once he realizes that, he'll understand what an idiot he's been. That night, March 18th, 1971, the Circus Maximus showroom at Caesar's Palace was packed. 1,200 people filled the red velvet seats. At the front, in a special reserved table, sat Bobby Castellano. Notepad in hand, pen ready, watching. Yoon walked on stage at 9 p.m. sharp. The band started playing. The lights came up, and for the next 2 hours, Dean Martin gave one of the most precise, controlled, flawless performances of his career. He sang every song perfectly, hit every note, landed every joke. The drunk stumble he did during That's a More was so obviously choreographed that Bobby wrote in his notepad, "Planned bit, not actual stumbling." When Dean pretended to slur his words during a story about Frank Sinatra, Bobby wrote, "Speech pattern is character choice, too consistent to be actual intoxication." Every moment Bobby had believed was evidence of Dean's drinking problem was revealed to be exactly what Dean said it was: performance, acting, a character Dean had created and perfected over 20 years. By the time Dean took his final bow, Bobby's notepad was full, but not with evidence of drunkenness, with notes about Dean's technical skill, his timing, his control. After the show, Dean went to his dressing room. He knew Bobby would come, and 10 minutes later there was a knock. "Come in." Bobby opened the door. Alone this time, no staff, no audience. He looked different than he had in his office, smaller, embarrassed. "You were right," Bobby said quietly. Dean was taking off his bow tie. "About what?" "About everything. I believed the act. I thought you were really drunk up there." "Most people do. That's the point." Bobby sat down uninvited. "I made a fool of myself this afternoon." "Yes, you did. I should apologize." Dean turned to face him. "You should, but not to me." "What?" "You accused me in front of your staff, Bobby. You humiliated me in front of a dozen people. If you apologize to me privately, it doesn't fix that. They'll still think I'm a drunk who got lucky tonight. You need to apologize to me in front of them, the same way you accused me." Bobby's jaw tightened. "You want me to apologize in front of my employees?" "I want you to tell the truth in front of your employees, that you were wrong, that you made assumptions about someone you didn't know, that you let gossip and stereotypes cloud your judgment." Bobby stared at Dean for a long moment. "And if I don't?" Dean shrugged. "Then I walk. Tomorrow, I'll trigger the morality clause in my contract. You accused me of substance abuse. That's grounds for termination on my end. I'll leave, and I'll make sure every performer in Vegas knows why. That Bobby Castellano at Caesar's Palace accused Dean Martin of being a drunk without any evidence. Let's see how many headliners want to work for you after that." Bobby went pale. He understood what Dean was saying. If Dean left and took the story with him, Bobby would be blacklisted. No major performer would trust him. Caesar's Palace would become known as the casino that ran off its biggest star. "You'd destroy my reputation over this." Dean's voice was quiet but firm. "You tried to destroy mine this afternoon, in front of people who work for you. You tried to make me look unreliable, unprofessional, weak, and you did it based on nothing but your own ignorance. So yes, Bobby, I'll destroy your reputation if you don't fix what you broke." Bobby stood up, walked to the door, stopped. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., my office. I'll have the same people there who were there this afternoon." "Good." Bobby left. Dean went back to removing his makeup. The next morning, March 19th, 1971, Bobby Castellano gathered his staff in his office. The same dozen people who'd been there the day before. Dean arrived exactly at 10 a.m. Bobby stood behind his desk, cleared his throat. "Yesterday I accused Dean Martin of having a drinking problem that affected his performances. I based this accusation on rumors and assumptions. Last night I watched Dean's entire show. He was flawless, professional, completely sober. I was wrong. Dean Martin is not drunk on stage. He never has been. What I mistook for drunkenness is actually one of the most skilled performances I've ever seen. An actor playing a character so convincingly that I, and apparently many others, believed it was real." Bobby looked directly at Dean. "I apologize for questioning your professionalism, for making baseless accusations, and for insulting you in front of my staff. You were right. I didn't understand Vegas. I didn't understand performers, and I didn't understand you." The room was silent. Bobby's staff were all watching Dean, waiting to see if he'd accept. Dean nodded. "Thank you, Bobby." Bobby looked relieved. "So we're good? You'll stay?" Dean shook his head. "No, I'm leaving." Bobby's face fell. "But I apologized. You said—" "I said you needed to apologize. You did. But that doesn't mean I have to stay. Bobby, you showed me yesterday who you are. You're someone who believes gossip over evidence, who makes judgments about people you don't know, who thinks owning a building means owning the people in it. And I don't work for people like that." Dean pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, placed it on Bobby's desk. "That's my notice, effective immediately. I'm exercising the termination clause in my contract. You'll get a letter from my lawyer explaining the legal basis, but the short version is, you created a hostile work environment by making false accusations about my sobriety. That's grounds for me to leave without penalty." Bobby picked up the envelope. "Dean, please, don't do this. We can work this out." "We already worked it out, Bobby. You apologized. I accepted. But accepting an apology doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It just means I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." Dean turned to leave, stopped at the door, looked back at Bobby's staff. "For what it's worth, you all seem like good people. You deserve better than working for someone who treats talent like servants. I hope Bobby learns from this, but I'm not sticking around to teach him." Then Dean left Caesar's palace, walked out through the casino floor, past the slot machines and card tables, through the marble columns and Roman statues, out into the bright Las Vegas sun. By that afternoon, every major casino in Vegas knew Dean Martin had walked away from Caesar's palace. The Riviera called within an hour, offered Dean a contract, double the money, better terms, and one special clause that Dean insisted on: no management personnel shall make comments, inquiries, or assumptions regarding performers' personal life, health, or sobriety. Violation of this clause grants performer immediate right to terminate contract with full compensation. Dean put it in writing, made it legally binding. If anyone ever accused him of being drunk again, he could walk away with millions. Bobby Castellano tried to save face, tried to spin the story, told reporters Dean left for creative differences. But Vegas is a small town. Word got around, the real story spread, and within 6 months, Caesar's palace ownership had seen enough. Bobby was fired, replaced by someone who understood that in Vegas, you don't own the talent, you partner with them. Years later, in 1979, Dean was doing an interview. The journalist asked about the drunk persona and whether Dean ever actually drank on stage. "Never," Dean said. "Well, almost never. Maybe once or twice over 40 years, but the stumbling, the slurred words, all that was acting. I spent 20 years convincing people I was drunk, and most of them believed it. That ever caused problems?" Dean smiled. "Once, guy who owned a casino thought I was really drunk, confronted me about it. I proved him wrong. Then I left." "Why leave if you proved your point?" Dean's smile faded. "Because proving someone wrong doesn't mean they've learned anything. This guy saw what he wanted to see. And even after I showed him the truth, I knew he'd find something else to criticize, some other way to try to control me. So I left. Life's too short to work for people who don't respect what you do." When Dean Martin died in 1995, his contract rider from the Riviera was found among his papers. That clause he'd written in 1971 about management not commenting on his sobriety. He'd kept it in every contract for the rest of his career. A reminder to himself and everyone he worked with: respect boundaries or lose me. Bobby Castellano died in 2003. His obituary mentioned he'd once owned Caesar's palace. It didn't mention Dean Martin. It didn't mention the confrontation. It didn't mention how Bobby learned the hardest lesson of his career. In Vegas, the talent has the power, not the money. Dean Martin's 3-word challenge, "Prove it," tonight, became legendary among Vegas performers. It was the moment a singer called a casino owner's bluff and won. The moment Dean Martin proved that his drunk act was so good, people couldn't tell the difference between performance and reality. And the moment Bobby Castellano learned that assumptions destroy careers. The real story isn't about drinking, it's about respect. Bobby Castellano believed stereotypes instead of evidence. He believed gossip instead of his own eyes. And when Dean offered him a chance to see the truth, Bobby was forced to admit he'd been wrong. But Dean didn't stay, because respect earned through confrontation isn't the same as respect given freely. Dean wanted to work for people who respected him from the start, not people who had to be educated about his worth. That's the lesson Bobby never learned. That's why he lost Dean, and that's why Caesar's palace lost the king of cool. Dean Martin was the most disciplined performer in Vegas. He just spent 40 years pretending otherwise, and when someone believed the act too much, Dean made them pay for their assumptions. Not with violence, not with lawsuits, with 3 words: prove it tonight. And when they couldn't, Dean walked away. Because in Vegas, if you don't respect the talent, you don't deserve to have them. That's power. That's control. That's Dean Martin.